Okay, hi everyone. My name is Anita. I am with the GZAP and Rutgers New Jersey Hope and Healing program. I'm here with Caleb, and we are going to talk a little bit about CBTI or cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically for insomnia. We are part of the Hope and Healing Project, as I said, um, which is a crisis counseling program that provides free services to people in New Jersey who are experiencing emotional distress due to natural and human disasters. The most prevalent one right now being the COVID-19 pandemic. Um, we provide short-term interventions like this webinar that involve assisting in understanding the current situation and common reactions to situations like this. We help people recover from the effects of emotional distress and disasters through community-based outreach. And we hope to empower survivors to advocate for their own services and resources. While we do not provide long-term psychotherapy or case management, we are able to help find other resources that might be of use to you and referrals. Some common reactions to COVID include things like sleeplessness, recurring dreams or nightmares, trouble concentrating, feeling numb, having outbursts of anger, persistent physical symptoms, struggling with overwhelming fear of anxiety related to yourself or your family's safety, avoiding reminders of the disease outbreak, and being tearful or crying for no apparent reason. So these are a lot of the common reasons or reactions to COVID, but they are by no means an exhaustive list. Our team is the integrated medical team that supports individuals and families with mental health or medical conditions requiring monitoring that would benefit from crisis counseling. We provide psychoeducational groups like this one that focus on wellness, stress management, and other topics. We provide support groups for those who are grieving. And like I said before, we do not provide psychotherapy services, but we can speak with individuals and families and provide support and resources. Okay. So today we are going to be talking about CBT for insomnia. I know it says Radwa on the screen. Unfortunately, she's unable to join us today. So in her place will be Caleb. Okay. So sleep disorders are really prevalent. About 6 to 10% of the population suffers from insomnia, with insomnia being the most common sleep disorder. There are a lot of individual symptoms that might not equate to, a full-blown clinical case of insomnia. That's about 30% of people struggling with insomnia symptoms. And insomnia is about 1.5 to 2 times more prevalent in women. Consequences of insomnia include things like hypertension, obesity, and diabetes. Actually, a 2011 study found that, reporting sleep problems and higher rates of depression found that those reporting sleep problems had a higher rate of depression, diabetes, and cardiovascular disturbances. So insomnia can really affect our physical health as well as our mental health. People that struggled with insomnia also reported more, safety errors like while driving, negative job outcomes, and general absenteeism.
So what does insomnia look like? So in the nighttime, this could look like trouble falling asleep, also trouble staying asleep, and also waking up too early and then unable to go back to sleep. Could also be a combination of all those different things. In terms of the daytime, it could mean not feeling well rested. You could have fatigue, feel irritable. Sometimes this could lead to low mood or more stress. It can also lead to a diagnosis of depression and anxiety, so it could get to that level as well. It could affect your level of attention and your ability to concentrate. And like Anita alluded to before, it could lead to poor decision making more broadly and more errors and accidents in life as well. So these are all signs and symptoms, and there are many other signs and symptoms of insomnia, but these are ones that are often the most noticeable.
All right. There are a variety of risk factors and maintaining factors related to insomnia. Sleep disorders are pretty complex, so there can be a variety of things that contribute to how they develop and how they are maintained. It can involve a level of hyperarousal that interferes with falling asleep or staying asleep. There could be an initial stressor that relates to a life stressor of physical symptoms that interrupt sleep. Maintaining factors are generally cognitive and behavioral. So usually things related to, like overthinking and like our behaviors before bed. And medications can also be a risk factor for insomnia. Like we mentioned a little bit before, there are a variety of comorbid physical and mental conditions associated with insomnia. Depression and anxiety are particularly the most common ones associated with it. There's sort of a cause and effect loop with depression as well. Fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue are also sort of comorbid physical conditions associated with that, and specifically non-restorative sleep. So sleeping but not getting any, sort of rest from it. And then chronic pain can also lead to inconsistent sleep.
Okay, so there's a cycle of insomnia that can often occur, and we wanted to point this out to you. So hopefully, if you're somewhere in this cycle, that you can recognize where you're at and how you can best get help. So if you look at the top where it says thoughts, sometimes, before we're going to bed or after, not being able to go to sleep or after waking up in the middle of the night, sometimes we have what we call sleep thoughts, which could be something like, I'm never going to go to sleep. I have to be asleep at this certain time. I have to wake up tomorrow at this time. I know I'm going to be grumpy again during sleep. I'm going to feel tomorrow. Basically making predictions and also trying to be really attached to a certain outcome or hope. These can all cause a lot of stress and anxiety as we're trying to get good, genuine sleep. And these thoughts can often then lead to affect how we feel. So we can feel frustrated, we can feel irritable, we can feel angry, and definitely feel a lot of tension. And as we continue with these feelings and with these tensions, that leads to physical sensations in our body. So, the feeling of anxiety, like the feeling of feeling tense in our stomach or tight in our shoulders. Our breathing quickens, our heart rate increases. There are physical sensations that are tied with how we feel, and these physical sensations interact with our body and with our mind as well. And with the combination of thoughts, emotions and feelings, and physical sensations, this can bring about unhelpful behaviors, which could include like constantly trying to check our, the clock. I'm sure many of us are guilty of this, but trying to, take out our cell phone and, maybe distract ourselves when sometimes that's not the most helpful thing to do before we go to bed. Trying to put a lot of effort into going to sleep instead of just being able to go to sleep, when we feel tired and successfully do that within a reasonable time. And a lot of tossing and turning. And oftentimes individuals that have sleep disorders, there's often a negative association with sleep because of the history that's there and with the current relationship that exists. And sometimes, when that idea is put out there, it's like, oh wow, I guess we do have a relationship with our sleep of sorts. And these are built by these habits. And again, it's a reciprocal pattern about how these behaviors then lead to thoughts, thoughts for emotions, etc., etc. So this can feel kind of depressing to look at because it's like, okay, how do we stop this cycle? The good news is that, as it's kind of like a snowball down the hill, like as thoughts get more and more restrictive and difficult, obviously this will lead to more intensity of emotions, etc., and they all build on each other. But also at the same time, positive thoughts can lead to helpful, more positive feelings, more positive physical sensations, and more helpful behaviors. So at any level of this will also help reverse this cycle into a more positive one. And hopefully, as we continue during this presentation, we can help educate you about some of the things that you can do to help fix this cycle of insomnia.
There are a variety of different components to CBTI and treating insomnia. The first is psychoeducation, and that's largely to help you understand the mechanisms of sleep and the sleep-wake regulation, so that you can understand what really goes into sleep and what are the mechanisms underlying that. Next are behavioral interventions, so altering how you do things, the behaviors you have, either before bed, while you're trying to sleep. There's also cognitive interventions, so being mindful of how we think about sleep, and particularly when we're trying to fall asleep, what's going on in our heads. And then, of course, there's troubleshooting and adherence monitoring. So making sure that you're sticking to the plan that will be set, and sort of adjusting things as need be.
So when it comes to different sleep stages, sorry about that. That's my dog who's a little sick. So in terms of sleep stages, there are different cycles of sleep. And so the first cycle of sleep are really within the first, hour or two of sleep. It's usually the longest cycle that we go through, and it's often one of the most important ones because this is where we reach very deep levels of sleep. So and this is for healthy sleep cycles, FYI. So, you start with kind of dreaming, drifting off, light sleep, deep sleep, very deep sleep. It's funny because sometimes we think that like when we're dreaming, we're at like the lowest level of like, subconscious or whatever. But actually there are many different levels to that are actually very important for not just restoring our mental health, but also restoring our physical health. Like when we sleep, our body, like our brain is helping our body physically repair ourselves as well. So sleep is really important for not just our mental health, but our physical health as well. And so ideally you get in as many, not just as many cycles, but you get in at as many quality cycles as well. So quality sleep, and we'll get more into that later. But this is just to really illustrate that there are different cycles of sleep, and this is what it ideally looks like in a more helpful sleep schedule, is that you're getting all these 5 cycles here. So this is where it comes to the sleep drive. So the sleep drive is really a process that psychologists have found that is similar to like drives of hunger, but it's something that is inside of our body and in our brains and in our minds, therefore, that regulates our levels of sleep or sleepiness and then wakefulness. And throughout our day, it's constantly shifting and changing. And there's a lot of factors that go into that. Ideally, right, we are sleepy when it's time for us to go to sleep, and we are wakeful when it's important for us to be wakeful during the day. And so in general, the process is that it's lowest in the morning, right? So after we wake up, our sleepiness is lowest in the morning because that's when our body's like, we need to get up, we need to go. And then as the day goes on, it increases, more as time elapses. So we get more and more tired throughout the day. And then during the night, it obviously takes us into actual sleep, and we are able to reach those different stages of sleep that we showed in the previous slide. So this is the ideal scenario. So if we follow the sleep drive, it's kind of what I was illustrating with my hands, but now there's a graph. I don't wake up at 6 a.m., but if you wake up at 6 a.m., this graph is accurate. But approximately, we start off at 6 a.m., and the sleep drive is ultimately starting around the midday, and then really starts to descend. Actually, I guess it starts from the second we wake up technically, but it's more continuous as we go. And so the sleepiness threshold is basically saying that this is the highest level of sleep drive that we will reach. And there are research that's coming out that's showing that napping frequently throughout the day actually disrupts our ability to actually get quality sleep at night. And although it can feel helpful in the moment of being able to take a quick nap because our sleep drive is high, because we're used to it, it's disrupting our sleep later in night. And so therefore it becomes kind of a reciprocal cycle, right? Getting sleep during the day, during like however long of a pocket during the day. It's nighttime, we don't sleep as well, wake up, we do the remedy that makes sense to us. So we'll talk about later again how to kind of help correct this. But yeah, studies have also shown that the common thought of like, if I don't get in enough sleep, then I can catch up on the weekend. There's some truth to this. There are some studies that show that, when we lose those quality stages of sleep, that, during the next night and the nights that precede, like there's a larger time spent in that kind of deep stage sleep. But that's not true for everyone. And also, what's important to know, it's not just how many hours you sleep, but it's the quality of which we sleep. So in this case, there have been some studies that have shown that, even if you sleep in on the weekends, it's not necessarily going to be like the rejuvenational key that's going to help you throughout the week. And sometimes sleeping in can actually cause you to be more sleepy. And not just in the weekend, but oversleeping is a real thing too, where we're actually causing our body to spend too long, almost have a stronger sleep drive, and actually spend not enough time in its wakefulness, so that during the day that we actually feel wakeful and restored. So if you are going to take a nap, it's recommended that it's done as far away as possible from the time that you actually intend to going to bed, if that is going to be a choice that you make. Because again, it takes a while for the sleep drive from this image that you can see to actually increase and actually reach its prime effect. And so some helpful information. So maybe you've heard of something called circadian rhythm or circadian clock. It's a biological thing that's in our body that is in actually most animals, that kind of literally works like a clock. And it's this internal rhythm that our brain and body regulates, that is on approximately a 24-hour period, that through a really complicated process basically sends alerts to us for us to either be wakeful or to be sleepy, again, through that wakefulness or that sleep drive. And so for those of us that struggle with sometimes sleep disorders or disordered sleep, the circadian clock is off, and therefore the circadian rhythm is off as well. And so alerting signals are actually doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. So during the day, right, when we want to be most wakeful, our body is thinking we need to be sleep. Basically, the sleep drive is increasing, like we need to be sleepy during this time. And then when it's time to be night, we're awake. And that's incredibly frustrating. And in a chronic sense, it can really cause significant impairment on our mental well-being, because sleep is so fundamental. I think I read somewhere that, I know not everyone sleeps 8 hours a day, but approximately, we're spending, I guess ideally, we're spending almost a third of our life asleep. So I always like thinking of that, because we often don't think about how much of our day actually is sleeping. So, or should be sleeping. So sleep is a really important part of our day, and it's important to kind of think, what's my circadian rhythm look like? Is it alerting me when I need to be awake, or is it doing something else? So again, ideally, strong sleep drive plus correct circadian placement. Sorry for my dog. 1 second. Okay, buddy? Okay, she's okay. So strong sleep drive plus correct circadian placement and low arousal means hooray, you got good sleep. Congratulations. Not much to say here, honestly. You can go to the next slide, Anita. And that will take us to self-monitoring.
Gotta unmute. Okay, so in CBTI, self-monitoring is critical in successfully treating insomnia. It's really important that you are able to keep track of your habits and your sleep schedule, so that where things are sort of going wrong, we can make sure that we're correcting them. Self-monitoring helps understand specifically what is giving the problems, where the problems are, and helps identify areas of treatment that may need tweaking. So areas that maybe one thing isn't working, so we can change that, and hopefully that'll work. So it's really important to be able to keep track of that. And this is primarily done through things like sleep diaries and a sleep calculator. This is an example of sleep diary. So you can see on sort of the left side, it has a bunch of different categories. So the amount of time spent napping or dozing, what time you went to bed, what time you went to sleep. There's a difference between when you go to bed and what time you actually fall asleep, and how long it took you to fall asleep. If you tend to wake up during the night, how many times did you wake up? Total times awake, maybe during those wake ups. The final wake up, what time was that? What time did you get out of bed? And how you would rate your sleep quality. And I know a lot of these can seem like pretty difficult to pin down a specific time. But like, while it's really important to keep, meticulous note keeping and to make sure that you're tracking, it's important that you sort of make an estimate of when these times are. It's going to be really hard to say specifically what time you fell asleep because you were asleep. But if you can give an estimate of about how long it takes you to fall asleep, that'll help in sort of estimating the time of when you fell asleep. And it also helps to know what your perception of how time moves when you're trying to sleep, when you're waking up in the night. So that also helps as well. One of the behavioral interventions that I talked about before was stimulus control. Basically, you want to strengthen the bed as a cue for sleep and to reverse conditioned arousal. So a lot of the times we sort of sit on our beds to do pretty much everything. I know I'm guilty of this as well. So sort of just sitting on my bed watching Netflix or something, sitting on my bed playing a video game. And, in that regard, the bed isn't used just for sleep, but it's used for other things as well, other things that may produce arousal rather than sort of reducing arousal and helping you fall asleep. Ideally with CBTI, you only use your bed for sleep and sex. Those are the only two things that your bed should really be used for. Otherwise, you should not be using your bed. So just for anything else that you might need to do it somewhere else. It's also important to get up at a consistent time. Only go to bed when sleepy, and not really forcing yourself to go to bed when you're not feeling tired, because then you're not really getting that conditioning from your body that this is when I'm sleepy, that's when I need to go to bed, and sort of just bringing your rhythm that Caleb talked about out of whack. Something that seems a little bit counterintuitive is getting out of bed when you're unable to sleep. And this can seem kind of weird because it's like, why would you get out of bed when you're trying to sleep? But actually, it can be really helpful to sort of reset ourselves. So getting up, that's not to say you should get up and, be on your laptop or grab your phone or something like that. Maybe get up, walk around your room a little bit, maybe do some stretching or yoga, or maybe like a deep breathing exercise that you can do. But it's really helpful to get out of bed, to allow your body to sort of get back to a neutral state. And then you can try and go back to sleep again in a little bit. And then finally, trying to limit or eliminate daytime naps. I know it can be really tempting when you get really tired during the day. I know particularly for me, I get really tired around lunchtime, after lunch, but really resisting the urge to take daytime naps, unless it is absolutely crucial and you need to take a nap. You don't want to be, if you need to be driving later, you don't want to be sleepy while you're driving. If you have work to do and it's, you're completely unable to get work done unless you take a nap, then that's fine. Just try to limit and moderate the amount of naps that you take and how long those naps are as well. Okay. The next behavioral intervention is sleep hygiene. So this is things like limiting your caffeine intake, avoiding alcohol before bed, usually about a few hours before bed, I would say. Making sure you're doing daily exercise of some sort. Taking a walk is perfectly fine. You don't need to be, going to the gym and exhausting yourself, but making sure you're getting yourself moving in some sort of way, preferably daily. Keep your bedroom quiet, dark, and at a comfortably low temperature. These are all sort of environmental things that can, help us get into a place of being able to fall asleep more easily. Have a wind down routine before bed. This is something that a lot of people have found really helpful. So having a routine to help you sort of wind down and decrease your arousal before bed. This can look like a variety of things. It can look like taking a shower and then maybe doing a deep breathing exercise. It can be stretching. It can be reading a book, a physical book, preferably not something on your phone, but just doing something to wind you down and calm you down before bed. You also want to avoid exposure to blue light in the wind down time, as we talked about. Avoid your TV, your phone, your laptop. I know our phones have, a nighttime mode that's supposed to sort of eliminate the blue light, but you still sort of want to make sure that you're staying away from it, even with those settings that we now have. Okay.
All right. So for a more, I guess, in-depth look of kind of some behavioral interventions, one thing that you can do, okay, buddy? One thing that you can do is sleep protection. Sorry about that. Okay, buddy? Okay. So the goal is to strengthen sleep drive. So you can first do this by focusing on improving sleep efficiency and quality before focusing on the amount of sleep. So therefore, we need to increase sleep drive. And the way to increase sleep drive is to restrict sleep. So it seems counterintuitive, but basically what happens is when you restrict sleep, it gives your body the ability to actually have sleep quality. Because remember how I mentioned earlier that when you are somewhat sleep deprived, the first few the first few cycles of sleep are like they go to a little bit more depth and you stay at the like the deepest levels of sleep for a little bit of a longer time because I was like catching up. Um, that's the idea behind kind of restricting sleep, is that your quality of sleep is going to be improved over time. And when the quality of sleep is improved over time, you're going to actually increase your sleep drive over time. You can go to the next slide. And so what does this actually look like? It sounds kind of extreme. So when you use the sleep diary, which again can be very helpful because it allows you to like look back and actually keep track of, okay, this is when I went to bed, this is when I woke up, this is the time I actually got out of bed, and here is how much time I spent sleeping. Sometimes sometimes we go throughout a week, we're like, man, I feel so tired, like I thought I slept well, and then we look back, we're like, oh, well, not so ideal. And vice versa, sometimes we don't feel as great during the day when we get too much sleep. So when we are practicing sleep restriction, in this case, a very specific thing that you can practice is like when you go to bed at 11 p.m. and if your wake up time is 7 a.m., the goal is to sleep only for 5 hours that night. So that could mean like waking up at 4 a.m. or it could mean staying up instead of normally going to bed at 11. You could basically spend 3 hours basically being awake, and so that's an example of like sleep restriction, is limiting your sleep to 5 hours. You can go to the next slide, Anita. So again, you can go to sleep at 2 a.m. and then you can get up at 7 a.m. And so this is something that you would do in the short term. This is definitely not healthy at all for you to be doing long term, but this can help initiate that, what we were talking about, the positive sleep cycle at first. And again, I want to be very clear about this. This is not recommended for those with medical conditions that will be made worse by sleep. And you should definitely consult a doctor first. And in general, I'll also put this in here that if you are like struggling with sleep, regardless if you have a diagnosis or you think you might have one, it might be like worth it if you have the resources to actually reach out to a therapist that specializes in sleep or that has training in, CBTI, which is this is the orientation that we're going through. Because as much as we like giving, like helpful tips for things like this, sometimes having someone that is like really expertised and can actually write you a more specific plan is something that can be a good investment and something to look into. But yes, this is kind of generally what sleep restriction would look like. And again, I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it can definitely help people.
So now we're going to look at some of the cognitive interventions for insomnia. The cognitive aspects of CBTI really target the sort of catastrophic thinking around not sleeping. So that includes things like when you're trying to fall asleep, just all the thoughts running through your head, like, I'm going to be so tired tomorrow if I don't get any sleep. I'm going to, not do well at work. I'm going to just not have any energy and it's going to be a really bad day. So really thinking all of these catastrophic thoughts, and they can really flood our minds when we're trying to fall asleep and having a hard time doing so. The point of these cognitive interventions is to reduce sleep effort and reduce cognitive arousal, because when you're having these sort of anxious, catastrophic thoughts, you're really increasing your arousal and making it harder for you to fall asleep. So things like relaxation and mindfulness are really key in helping reduce this cognitive arousal and the effort that it takes to actually fall asleep. It's important to address dysfunctional beliefs about sleep. So different beliefs about sleep that might not be true. And that's where the psychoeducation about sleep comes in. And it's also important to identify obstacles to adherence. So if you're having trouble keeping on some of the tasks that you need to do or the homework you need to do with CBTI, like, sleep tracking. What are the reasons for that? Why might you be having a hard time doing this? Why what needs to change in order for, the change to happen? So these are all things that are sort of under the umbrella of cognitive interventions. Decreasing arousal is really the big sort of core issue, specifically with the cognitive interventions. Like I mentioned from the previous slide, a lot of when we're trying to fall asleep, the anxious catastrophic thoughts are really ramping us up and increasing our arousal when we really want to decrease our arousal. So there are a variety of relaxation techniques like breathing exercises, progressive muscle relaxation, visual imagery. These are just a few ways that you can sort of help yourself relax. Breathing exercises and muscle relaxation specifically are really helpful. And you can find a lot of exercises and meditations on apps like Headspace. I think there's also a Calm app. There's also various podcasts and maybe, YouTube videos to help. And of course, we're trying to, limit phone time. So it would really be about listening rather than watching something. And, something that seems a little bit strange to say is to schedule worry time. It's okay to worry. It's okay to have these worries and concerns, but try not to do it when you're sleeping. So maybe not quite in the wind down time before you're trying to go to bed, but schedule yourself time to worry. It's okay to have worrying and anxious thoughts and these sort of catastrophic thoughts. So give yourself that time to worry so that it's a bit less pressing when you're trying to fall asleep. And so you've done the worry, and it's a bit strange to say because it's not like the worry is just going to go away if you have the worry time. But with practice and with giving yourself a set time to do that worrying, it can really help sort of alter sort of our patterns of thinking. And like I said before, give yourself a wind down time or a buffer zone before sleep. So that's really just establishing routines to help you, decrease your arousal and get into a space where it's comfortable and easier for you to fall asleep. Okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us at hopeandhealing@rutgers.edu or New Jersey Hope and Healing at Rutgers.edu. Our website the link is down at the bottom here, but you can also use the QR code to find more information about New Jersey Hope and Healing. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you were able to learn some things about CBTI and ways that you might be able to tackle sleep problems that you might be having.
Thank you, everyone. And if you have any questions, you can email this. So we'll happy to respond. Thank you.